Hi everyone, my name is Elaine and today I will be testing and reviewing this set of Honolulu B alcohol markers from Ohuhu. I'm working on this gorgeous design by Mystic Art Mirrors from Colouring Heaven Healing Crystals collection. I am really excited to get started and jump in with working with these markers on our lovely image today. But I thought first of all we could take a little bit of a closer look at the markers themselves. So here we go. And straight away we can see a couple of things going on there. We do have a round barrel to these markers, which is also pretty substantial. So that will make them comfortable to be holding and to be using. We do have colour-coded ends to each end of the cap here, which corresponds to the colour of the ink that's actually in the marker. The name and the number of the ink is also written on each end of the pen. Each pen also has a different nib on each end of the marker. On this end we have a brush tip, and this end has a finer, more bullet style point, and these bullet nibs, the finer ones, are marked with this grey ring around the actual marker, so you can tell at a glance which end of the pen you are actually uncapping to be colouring with. We also have these two ridges on each of the caps, and those are designed, because we have the rounded barrel, those are designed to stop the pen actually rolling off your desk. If you put it to the side, these ridges will stop the pen rolling off your desk and dropping to the floor. So with all that being said, let's have a look at these two different nibs and how those work. The first one I'll show you is the brush nib, that is this one here. Really flexible type brush nib, does come down to a really fine point there, and with these kind of brush nibs you can get really fine lines. If you apply just a little bit of pressure, much like using a paintbrush, you can get really fine delicate lines, whereas if you apply a little bit more pressure you can get thicker lines or cover larger areas of your colouring. And I'll just show you those on this square paper here. You can see if I apply just a tiny bit of pressure with this pen nib here, we do get some nice fine delicate lines going on, but pressing harder, you can see I'm pressing harder there, and the line is getting a lot thicker. You can get some lovely line variation just by adjusting the pressure that you do put onto your nib there, from thick to thin and back again. So those are really kind of versatile. So that is how the brush nib works out. For the fine nib, this one here is the fine nib. These are a lot firmer, mainly meant for details, not for covering large areas, and not so much line variation with those. There we go. This is the line that you get with your kind of finer bullet type nib here. Good for maybe cross hatching. Yeah, I can see them being used a lot for that. But yeah, not for the large areas, those ones there, I wouldn't say. I would use the brush tip for the larger areas, and maybe this finer tip for any little fine details you might want to be making. While I have this spare paper out, let's maybe see how these pens do blend. So the marker I was originally using for my little nib tests up there, that one is called the B080 Process Blue. I found another blue from the set that's maybe a little bit darker. This is B180 Vienna Blue, and I'm going to try and blend these two together. I'm not an expert at blending by any means, but let's see what kind of results that we can get. So I started off with the paler blue there, now moving on to the darker, and maybe trying to layer a little bit to see if I can get a blend going on with these pens. And that's one method of blending that I have come across while I've been working with alcohol markers. This method of doing the kind of flicking strokes like this, which is what we will be working with when we get onto working with our design, and we'll be doing those kind of flicking strokes. Before we move on from our little test here, I will show you one other thing that is pretty common for most brands of alcohol markers. The ink will leak through your page, especially if you are using thinner paper. The ink will leak through, especially to the back of the actual image you are colouring, and it will move on to mark any kind of pages that are behind there. So it's always best to have some kind of a blotter between the page you are colouring and anything that is behind, whether that's another page in the colouring book or any kind of surface. We are provided in this alcohol marker set with a plastic sheet, this thin plastic sheet here, and the purpose of that is to go between the page you are colouring and anything that might be underneath. This set of markers did come with two pre-printed blank swatch sheets for you to be filling out with your actual markers. So I've already gone ahead and filled those in, and we can see the full range of colours that we will have to be choosing from today. There are 104 different colours in this set. They range from the pastel kind of hues here through the brighter, really vivid colours down to some fluorescent at the bottom here. Each marker is really pigmented and none of them were dry. They were all really juicy markers. And yeah, now that we've got our tests out of the way, we've looked at our swatch cards, it's time to move on to our actual image. So for our lady here, I thought we could start with actually colouring some of her hair to give some of our crystals a little bit of a background maybe. I have picked out two colours from the assortment that we do have, maybe to give this lady a kind of a dark blonde hair colour, and these two other markers I think will work pretty well for that. We do have E450 fennel seed for a darker shade, and we have Y250 flax, just using the two colours to keep things fairly simple here. And we will mainly be using the brush nib today. And these brush nibs are reversible, for one. If your brush nib does actually start to wear out, you can actually pull out this brush nib, turn it around and put it back in and have a fresh new nib working for you there. Or you can buy packs of replacement nib from Ohuhu themselves. And you can see that for our hair we are starting here with the flicking motions, the kind of flicking motions that we did do in our little blending test. And ease off the pressure as we get to the middle of each section, because we're going to try and keep the white of the paper coming through as a little bit of a highlight. I do like to come in with a white gel pen quite often when I'm colouring hair, but for this image here we're going to try leaving the white of the paper to be our highlight. So we're starting at the end of the lock of hair, coming in with our kind of flicking motions, easing off the pressure as we get to the middle of the strand. Moving in closer to the middle there and leaving the white as the highlight. Make her hair look shiny. Okay, there we are. There's one layer of our lightest colour here. Then we're going to bring in the fennel seed and we're going to add some more shorter strokes, again following the lines of the strand lines in this lady's hair. And while that ink is still a little damp, these pens do dry very, very fast, so we need to move fairly quickly if we want to blend using this technique. But moving in fairly fast, we will go over the top there and add some more of our lighter shade to give a nice blend there in our lady's hair. And we can see there the colours are blending together really well and giving this lady the dark blonde hair that we were aiming for, just with using the two colours. So yeah, that's working super well with this blending here, I think. And we're still trying to leave that white highlight in the middle of each lock of hair. And this flicking technique here that I'm using for hair, that is exactly the same technique as I will be using for my crystals. Because crystals, when I like to colour them, I like to make them look really transparent and look as if the light is shining through them. So this technique of leaving the white space will be coming in quite a lot with our crystals. But on our crystals we will be using more shades than just the two. The same kind of technique, but more than two shades. This technique of doing the flicking lines and then coming back in with the dark colours. Of course you can layer, I hadn't mentioned that, you can layer alcohol markers over themselves to get a slightly darker shade of a colour. Try again. You can layer alcohol markers over themselves to get a slightly darker shade of the colour. You can maybe do 2 or 3 different layers of the same marker to also get a variation in your shade here. And again we're leaving that white highlight in the middle there to give this lady some lovely shiny hair, and I think that is working super well for us there. To kind of give us a sort of idea of the technique and seeing how we can use this technique in different ways. And one of the main things whenever you're colouring any picture, before you start really, is to decide which area of the picture your light source will be coming from. And for me, to kind of default to that would be the top left. This top left corner here is where I usually have my light source, my imaginary light source coming from whenever I'm colouring a picture. So that's how I've tried to construct her hair there. I've tried to leave these highlights where the light would be shining onto her hair if it was coming from this top corner. And that's where I've left these white highlights, and that will be even more important when we do come to the crystals. I have picked out from our wider range of colours here a few different colour combinations that I think I can make work for these crystals. I have picked out from our nice wide range of colours here a few colour combinations that we can use for the crystals, mainly 3 or 4 different shades of a colour that we can use all together to build up our crystals and leave those white areas to make our light look as if it is shining through the crystal. So I'm going to move on now and show you how I would actually colour these crystals with alcohol markers. The first crystal I have picked out to show you is this one here, as it's one of the more simpler shapes that we have among all these crystals in the picture. So each face of the crystal, if we look at this one here, each face of the crystal that is the closest to the light, that would be facing into the light, you kind of have to imagine the crystal as a three-dimensional shape, and which piece of this crystal would be facing the light. It's this big area here and maybe these two here. So those would be the lightest areas that you would want to be colouring on this crystal, whereas these facing away from the crystal, these would be among the darkest areas, these kind of intermediate. So we're going to take the lightest of our markers here. I have picked out a few in different shades of green that we're going to be using for this crystal. We have here G110 Mignonette, we have G410 Light Holly Green, G270 Moss, and we have a G470 Pine Tree Green. And first of all, we're going to start with our lightest colour, which is the Mignonette. And again, we'll be using the same kind of flicking strokes that I have described already. I like to keep the strokes going along the same kind of direction as one of the sides of our kind of face of the crystal here. And move down somewhat into the middle, but we do want to make it look as if the light is shining quite brightly onto this crystal, so we're going to have quite a nice big bright white area in that middle there. The next shade of green we have is G270, and this one we will be sort of a little bit more sparing with, slightly darker, but again working the same kind of method, leaving our white space in the main face of the crystal. And if anything comes into a point like that, I do like to add a little bit more shade into there. There we go, we're looking pretty good there, I think. But again, you can always come back in with different layers. You can lay out quite well with alcohol markers, especially if you let each layer dry before the last. And on these faces that are away from the light, we can go a little bit more heavier with our layers and get our shadows. I also have this one, which is G470, the Pine Tree Green. And this one I thought I'd save for the very areas that I want to be a lot more deeper in shadow. Trying to keep my marks all going the same way, but it doesn't matter if you kind of have a few odd extra marks here and there, because light does bounce around quite a lot inside crystals, so any little different strokes that you pop in or any little mistakes that you make will be covered up and will look perfectly fine. Will just look as if it's light bouncing around inside your crystal there, which is all good. Side a little bit. We can have a few strokes leading off up into our actual white area in the middle. Again, looking as if the light is bouncing around inside that crystal there. The main point is to have that bright white area in the middle of the crystal that looks as if the light is actually entering the crystal, maybe going through it. And for a finishing touch when I am colouring crystals, what I like to do is bring in a white gel pen. This one is a Uniball Signo Broad White Gel Pen. And I like to cover up the line art on the inside of the crystal, again to make it look as if it is maybe a little bit see-through, a bit translucent, and the light is shining actually on the edges of all these different faces we have going on there for the crystal. I would normally go around the outside line art as well, but for this image we do have a thick line art around the outside of each crystal, so I think I'm going to leave that as is. And there we go, we have a nice transparent see-through kind of crystal there. Of course, with the white gel pen as well, if you do think you have gone over a bit too much of your kind of white highlight area in the middle of any of your faces, you can come in with the white gel pen and bring back those highlights a little bit. I'll add a few more here and there The next colour combination that I'd like to show you, maybe we'll move on to this bigger crystal here, is a purple kind of amethyst tone colour combination. And these are the shades that I've picked out that I thought would maybe work for a purple crystal. We do have R242, which is greyish cherry, more of a pinkish colour that, but it does tone in quite well with these purples, so I thought maybe I'd bring that in. We have VO50, which is pearl violet, VO80, which is dark violet, and for my very, very dark shadows, like we did with this green here, I think this one works quite well. It's a V390, a dark slate blue, more of a bluish tone. But when you are picking out your colour schemes for these crystals, you can kind of veer each side of your colour on the colour wheel. Like instead of just sticking to purple, you could go maybe to a bluish purple or more of a reddish purple, or as we've done here, we have gone for a pink. As long as your colours all kind of look as if they could be shades or tones of each other, then I think you're good to go. And these ones do work together pretty well to give us a purple crystal. So there we are with that purple crystal done. I think that's looking pretty good there. So I'll move on to show you another colour combination that I did pick out. I've zoomed just very slightly in for this one because this crystal is a little bit smaller and it has some little more smaller fiddly faces going on with it. So the colours that I've picked out for this one, we have R240 Garnet, we have R170 Lipstick Red, we have RV330 Strawberry Pink, we have RV130 Queen Pink. Okay, there we go. I think we've got a pretty sparkly looking ruby happening there. So I'm really pleased with how these colours are all working together and actually blending into each other to give us these nice kind of crystal variations going on. I do have two more colour combinations that I'd like to show you, so maybe I'll work on these two gems here. The first one is a kind of aqua blue colour scheme, which I think seems to work quite well for diamonds maybe. And these are the colours that I've picked to use. We have a G324, which is aqua blue, G320 jade green, G322, which is pale aqua mint, and we also have a yellow there. This one is called a greyish yellow because when I do a kind of diamond or sort of an aqua colour gem, I do like to bring in a little bit of yellow to maybe look as if we have some sunlight glinting on there. So for this gem, this big one here, I think I'll work on in the aqua colour. I'm going to keep the kind of technique exactly the same. And of course, as a little bit of an extra note, a little bit of fun, if you do want to make your gems look as if they are really, really super sparkly, you can be adding sparkles with your white gel pen. And the way that I do that, I do a kind of a circle shape there. I do a short kind of line going across and then a longer up and down line like that. And there we are, a really sparkly diamond gem. And from my last colour combination I'd like to show you, I do have these blue pens picked out here. We have MG030, which is blue grey 03. We have B110, which is crystal blue, that is appropriate for this picture. We have B270, which is a vivid blue. And we have V390, the dark slate blue, which is the same colour that we used for our big purple crystal here. So there we go, some really quick, really sparkly, crystal looking gems there. And as I described at the beginning, all you really need to do each of these kind of crystal gems is maybe 3 different shades of a colour, whether that be green, purple, blue. You can go up to maybe 4 or 5 depending on how adventurous you are actually feeling, but at the very basic level, you need 3 different colours, as we did. I think with the green, we had 3 different colours, a light, a medium, and a dark shade of green with your alcohol markers, and you can get something that looks similar to this. And basically, the more white that you leave on the faces of your crystals, such as this big purple gem here, we've left a lot of white in this one, the more white that you leave on your crystal, the more kind of transparent your crystal will be looking. So here we are with our finished results today, and I have to say that I really did enjoy using those markers. They really are comfortable to hold and to use. The colours are bright and saturated. The ink blends really well, even without much effort from my part, even in places. There is a nice range of colours in the set, ranging from soft pastel tones through the brights and the vivids, even fluorescent. So it was really easy to pick out some colours for these colour palettes for our crystals today. If anybody is interested in colouring along, there will be links in the description below, both for the Colouring Heaven site to purchase your own copy of Colouring Heaven Healing Crystals collection, or to purchase your own Ohuhu markers. Please remember to like, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos.